Picts were the ancient people of Scotland, depicted by history as fearsome, painted warriors, feared even by the Romans.
For centuries, the Picts were Scotland's greatest mystery, vanished from history, their language lost, their symbols undecoded. But in 2023, everything changed.
Hard evidence of the Picts and their kingdom has been hard to find. Now, though, a team of archaeologists thinks they might just have pinpointed the seat of Pictish power.
A single DNA breakthrough didn't just reveal who they were, it shattered centuries of myth and stunned experts worldwide.
Most of your DNA is Norwegian. Your original thought that your ancestors, the Gaels, were here peacefully and were attacked by the Vikings. If most of your DNA is actually Norwegian, it suggests that you were not the victims, you were the aggressors.
What scientists discovered in their bones rewrote the origin story of Scotland itself. And if the Picts weren't lost, what else have we misunderstood? This isn't folklore anymore, it's science, finally speaking for the silent. Romans meet the painted people. The first time history truly took notice of the people we now call the Picts was through the eyes of their enemies. Roman writer Eumenes spoke of fierce painted men and women who lived in the cold, untamed lands of the far north, beyond Rome's control. The historian Cassius Dio, writing around 197 AD, described northern tribes who tattoo their bodies with various designs and pictures of all sorts of animals. These weren't mere raiders. They were a relentless thorn in the side of Rome's ambitions in Britain. To the soldiers stationed on the frontier, the word Picti carried both fear and fascination. It meant the painted ones, a reference to the tattoos or war paint that covered their bodies. The stories told by Roman writers may have been exaggerated, dramatic flourishes meant to cast these people as wild and uncivilized compared to Rome's ideals of order. But the image stuck. The Picts became forever known as the fierce, untamed warriors of the north. When the Roman general Agricola marched into Scotland in the late 1st century, he faced powerful tribal alliances that later Roman accounts would blur together as one group, wild northerners, painted and fearless. The famous battle at Mons Graupius around AD 83 was celebrated by the historian Tacitus as a Roman triumph. But the truth on the ground was far less decisive. Rome never managed to hold those northern lands for long. Within 3 years of this supposed triumph, Rome abandoned every northern fort. Hadrian's Wall, built decades later, marked where Roman expansion permanently stopped. A lasting symbol of that reality, it marked not the edge of Roman power, but the limit of it. Beyond the wall lay the land of the Picts. The Picts mastered guerrilla warfare. They knew every forest path, mountain pass, and bog. Small war bands struck from mist, then vanished before legions could respond. For Roman soldiers trained in open-field formations, this was warfare inverted. They struck fast, disappeared into the mist, and made Rome bleed without ever giving the empire the satisfaction of a true victory. The frustration of Rome's legions is clear in their own records. The Picts weren't just resisting. They were slowly wearing down the confidence of one of history's greatest empires. Yet even in these biased Roman accounts, we find valuable glimpses of who the Picts truly were. Confederations of tribes capable of uniting under pressure, leaders strong enough to rally armies that could threaten a superpower, and a culture so distinct that it refused to be forgotten. What stands out most is not just their hostility, but their resilience. Rome brought its roads, forts, and discipline, but the Picts survived by mastering their terrain and refusing to fight by the empire's rules. In the grand struggle for control, it wasn't Rome that reshaped the north. It was the north that reshaped Rome's ambitions. This early image of the Picts is powerful because it sets up the mystery that would endure for centuries. They entered history as painted warriors on the edge of the empire, but they did not leave it that way. By the 9th and 10th centuries, they vanished from the written record, as if swallowed by the very mists that had always protected them. It's a story that begins with fire and paint and ends in silence. That silence has haunted historians ever since. Who were these people, really? And how could a culture so fierce, so enduring, simply disappear? The Romans could only speculate, and for centuries so did we. But that mystery, first glimpsed through the weary eyes of Rome, would not stay hidden forever. The legacy of the stones. Long after the Romans retreated and their mighty walls crumbled into ruin, the Picts left behind something far more lasting than any victory on the battlefield: their stones. Scattered across the Scottish landscape, these carved slabs stand silent against the wind. Their surface is etched with symbols that feel almost like a language, one we can nearly grasp, but never fully translate. These stones are the only voices the Picts allowed to echo through time. They speak without words, whispering fragments of a culture that refused to be forgotten. For centuries, archaeologists have studied them, trying to unlock their code, yet their meaning remains one of Europe's great unsolved mysteries. Hundreds of these stones exist, roughly grouped into three classes. The earliest, known as Class 1, are unshaped boulders or slabs carved with simple, sharply inscribed symbols: crescents, rods, discs, and beasts. Later, in Class 2, those same symbols appear beside Christian crosses, carved in raised relief. They mark a fascinating period of transition, a time when the Picts began blending their ancient traditions with the influence of the new faith spreading across their lands. By Class 3, the old symbols disappear entirely, replaced by full Christian imagery, a sign that something uniquely Pictish was fading away. But it's the earliest stones, the raw, mysterious ones, that continue to capture imaginations. Their carvings are both elegant and cryptic: crescents paired with V-rods, double discs, Z-shapes, and the haunting image of the so-called Pictish beast. Take the crescent and V-rod, for example, two intersecting shapes that have sparked endless theories. Some believe it represents the moon and stars, others see it as a weapon or a symbol of status. Then there's the mirror and comb, motifs repeated again and again. Some scholars think they were symbols of womanhood or beauty. Others suggest they marked rank, lineage, or social power. Each carving feels deliberate, purposeful, yet their true meaning remains just out of reach, like a voice calling faintly from the mist. And then there is the Pictish beast, a curving, almost dolphin-like creature that seems to belong to no known species. Its form is fluid and strange, part animal, part imagination. Some believe it represents a stylized whale, others see it as a dragon, while a few insist it's a creature born entirely from myth, a symbol carrying meanings we no longer have the tools to understand. Each interpretation reshapes the stones into a new story, yet none has ever stood as the final truth. What deepens the mystery is the remarkable consistency of these carvings. The same symbols appear on stones scattered miles apart, suggesting the Picts followed a deliberate system rather than random artistic impulse. Many researchers believe these symbols formed a kind of script, not a complete alphabet, but a structured way of recording names, titles, or messages that would have been instantly recognizable to those who once lived among them. In the early 2000s, a statistical study compared the arrangement of Pictish symbols with known writing systems and discovered striking similarities in structure and repetition. To some scholars, this was the long-awaited breakthrough, evidence that the stones represent a lost written language. To others, it only made the enigma deeper, hinting that the Picts may have created a form of communication so unique that no modern cipher can ever fully unlock its meaning. These stones were never hidden away in secluded corners. Many stood proudly at crossroads, along boundaries, or near ancient gathering grounds. They were not just art, they were public declarations carved into the landscape itself, silent monuments of power, ancestry, and faith. Imagine walking through the Scottish hills 1,000 years ago, seeing these carvings glowing pale against the rock, instantly recognizing which clan, leader, or lineage they represented. To the people who made them, the stones must have spoken clearly. To us, they whisper only in riddles. Even as Christianity swept through Scotland, the Picts did not immediately abandon their ancestral symbols. Instead, they merged them with crosses, blending old traditions with the new faith in ways that still puzzle scholars. Were they resisting change, or simply weaving their heritage into a shifting world? Perhaps both. The result was a unique fusion, a visual dialogue between belief and identity. It's no coincidence that some of the grandest Pictish monuments, like Sueños stone and the Forres carvings, display both Christian imagery and vivid scenes of warriors in battle. These stones tell stories, part spiritual, part political, and part lost to time. For centuries, their silence has been their most haunting trait. Every new discovery brings excitement, only to leave us with more questions than answers. And yet, that is where their power lies. They remind us that the Picts were not merely a forgotten tribe on the margins of empire, but a people who found a way to make their presence eternal, not through conquest, but through stone and symbol. They were builders, artists, and visionaries who captured their world in symbols as enduring as the stones they carved. But then, something changed. The symbols stopped, almost as if a door had been closed and the language sealed behind it. That sudden silence deepened the mystery. Why did it end so abruptly? For generations, historians have wrestled with the same haunting question. Did the Picts themselves vanish? Or did only their way of remembering fade from view? The Lost Kingdom of Alba. Between 839 and 900 AD, just 3 generations, the Picts disappeared from written records. The last clearly Pictish king, Bright-Eye son of Ferrat, died around 842. After Kenneth MacAlpin united the kingdoms in 843, chronicles stopped mentioning Picts entirely. They spoke only of Scots. This fading identity unfolded during an age of chaos. Viking raiders struck the coasts of Britain and Ireland, toppling kingdoms and redrawing boundaries. Meanwhile, the Gaelic realm of Dalriada in the west was growing in power. The Picts, once fierce warriors and master builders, found themselves hemmed in by foreign invasions and shifting alliances. Chroniclers still recorded the names of Pictish kings well into the 9th century. Figures like Angus II and Breda III ruled lands that had once defied Rome itself. But then came Kenneth MacAlpin, remembered as the first king of Scots. Around 843 AD, he united the Gaels and the remaining Pictish territories under one crown, creating the Kingdom of Alba. Whether he conquered the Picts, married into their line, or forged a subtler alliance remains uncertain. What we do know is that after Kenneth's rise, history stopped speaking of Picts and began to speak of Scots. That silence left centuries of historians and storytellers grasping for answers. Medieval writers imagined the Picts as a cursed race, wiped out by war, consumed by plague, or punished by fate itself. Later, scholars offered gentler theories, that the Picts weren't destroyed at all, but absorbed by the Gaels, their language, art, and customs slowly blending into the new fabric of Scotland. Others believed they scattered across the land, leaving behind only echoes, their names etched into villages, rivers, and the carved stones that still defy translation. Each version added another layer to the mystery. How could a people who once defied Rome, carved their stories into stone, and ruled powerful northern kingdoms simply vanish? The enigma deepens with their language. Only fragments of names and inscriptions survive, yet the tongue itself disappeared almost overnight. Unlike Welsh, Cornish, or Gaelic, it left no living descendants, no poems, prayers, or songs carried forward through time. Welsh survived centuries of suppression. Irish Gaelic endured and revived. Even Cornish, declared extinct, has been partially restored. But Pictish left fewer than 10 readable inscriptions. The linguistic erasure was nearly complete. It was cultural erasure on a scale rarely seen in Europe, as if an entire civilization had been deliberately erased from the record. Even medieval Scots, centuries later, struggled to explain who the Picts truly were. Chroniclers filled the void with legend, claiming they descended from Scythians or mysterious peoples from the east. The less that was known, the more myth crept in. Yet for all their supposed disappearance, traces of the Picts never fully faded. The outlines of their kingdoms helped shape the map of medieval Scotland. Their intricately carved stones continued to stand where people lived, prayed, and buried their dead. Their hill forts, like Burghead on the Moray coast or Dundurn in Perthshire, remained proud silhouettes against the sky long after their builders were forgotten. It was as though the Picts themselves refused to vanish completely, leaving behind stone and story as quiet acts of defiance. And in that tension, between their disappearance and their lasting presence, lies the truth that perhaps they were never erased at all. Perhaps they simply transformed, their identity reborn within the emerging kingdom of Alba. A new kingdom emerged from the blending of ancient peoples, a fusion of cultures where the Picts played a crucial, though often overlooked, role. They didn't truly vanish, they evolved. As Alba rose with a new name, new rulers, and a fresh political order, the Picts' identity was absorbed into something larger, something destined to become Scotland. Yet for generations, this transformation was misunderstood. The name Alba was chosen for convenience, as both the governing and lower classes of the kingdom were primarily Pictish Gaels, then Pictish Gaels and Scoto-Normans, throughout this time period. This contrasts sharply with the House of Stuart period, which began in 1371 and saw the governing classes of the realm mostly speak Middle English, which later evolved into what became known as Lowland Scots. To historians, it seemed as if the Picts had stepped into history with color and defiance, painted warriors who resisted Rome, carved their stories into stone, and ruled proud northern realms, only to vanish without a trace. By the dawn of the medieval era, their name had disappeared from every chronicle. That quiet erasure baffled scholars for centuries, turning the Picts into one of history's most haunting enigmas. For the longest time, the search for answers relied on faded manuscripts, broken legends, and speculation. But as the centuries passed, new tools emerged, technologies that could look beyond myths and into the very fabric of human history. The truth about the Picts wouldn't come from old texts or rumors. It would come from the ground itself, from the bones of the people who once painted their skin, built their stones, and walked the mist-covered hills of ancient Scotland. It was through archaeology and DNA science that the story of the Picts began to rise again, piece by piece, from the silence they left behind. Then archaeologists began to dig deeper, both literally and historically, and what they uncovered would forever change how the world viewed these so-called lost people. Excavations at sites like Rhynie and Tap O'Noth in Aberdeenshire became breakthroughs that challenged everything we thought we knew. The Picts, it turned out, were not the scattered tribes of barbaric raiders described by Roman chroniclers. They were organized, wealthy, and remarkably sophisticated. At Rhynie, discoveries stunned researchers. Among the soil and stone lay imported goods from as far as the Mediterranean, fragments of Roman wine amphorae, fine glassware, and intricate metalwork. These were not the possessions of an isolated community fighting for survival in the remote north. They were the symbols of a connected elite society, people engaged in long-distance trade, with access to wealth, artistry, and influence. Mediterranean wine amphorae, glass vessels from Francia, metalwork showing continental styles. These goods traveled over 1,500 miles to reach northeastern Scotland, evidence of elite connections spanning Europe. Archaeologists even found evidence of lavish feasts, the kind meant to project status and power. Rhynie was no forgotten outpost. It was a hub, an early seat of authority linking Scotland's northeast to the broader world beyond. Nearby, the ancient hill fort at Tap O'Noth added even more intrigue. Once thought to be just another Iron Age relic, advanced surveys revealed foundations of hundreds of structures at Tap O'Noth, suggesting population density exceptional for early medieval Scotland. This was an organized urban-scale settlement, not scattered forest dwellers. The discovery painted a new picture of the Picts as city builders, capable of managing large settlements, labor, and defense. It suggested kingship, governance, and social structure far beyond what earlier historians believed possible. Further north, excavations at Burghead Fort on the Moray coast uncovered even more astonishing evidence. Beneath the remnants of massive defensive ramparts, the remains of one of the largest Pictish strongholds, archaeologists unearthed rare treasures, including a stunning kite-shaped ring inlaid with garnet or red glass. Artifacts like this spoke of refined craftsmanship and influence from continental Europe. The ring's style matches Merovingian Frankish jewelry from across the English Channel, suggesting diplomatic or trade connections with continental courts. This was not the jewelry of a remote people, but the adornment of a powerful elite, people in conversation with the wider cultural currents of their age. Piece by piece, the old image of the Picts as mysterious barbarians faded. In its place emerged something far grander, a civilization of power, artistry, and ambition. They built monumental forts, commanded trade routes, and left behind a legacy carved in both stone and metal. The Picts were no longer peripheral players on the edge of the empire. They were a central force shaping early medieval Britain. Yet, even as archaeology brought their world into focus, one haunting question remained unsolved. What became of them? The stones stood silent. The chronicles offered little. Each new discovery illuminated their lives, but not their disappearance. To uncover that truth, researchers had to turn to a different kind of evidence, something older, deeper, and far more intimate than artifacts. The answer, as it turned out, was written not in stone or metal, but in the bones of the Picts themselves. When genetic science finally entered the story, it didn't just offer explanations, it shattered centuries of assumptions and rewrote the very origins of Scotland in ways no one saw coming. The truth in their bones. For centuries, historians tried to uncover the fate of the Picts using ancient chronicles, ruined forts, and cryptic stones as their guides. Yet those fragments of history could only tell part of the story. The real answers, it turned out, were buried much deeper, within the bones of the people themselves. In 2017, that truth finally began to surface. A groundbreaking DNA study pulled back the curtain on one of Scotland's oldest mysteries. By extracting and sequencing genetic material from Pictish burials in areas like Fife and Easter Ross, scientists uncovered evidence that stunned the academic world. The results didn't just explain who the Picts were, they overturned centuries of assumptions about what happened to them. The genomes told a story no written record had ever preserved. Far from being mysterious outsiders or invaders from some forgotten land, the Picts were found to share a continuous genetic lineage with the Iron Age peoples who had lived in northern Britain for generations. Their roots ran deep into Scottish soil, tracing back long before Rome ever set foot on the island. The so-called painted people weren't strangers. They were the original inhabitants, shaped by the same landscapes their descendants still walk today. This revelation demolished the old idea that the Picts were an exotic, vanished race. They were indigenous Scots in every sense of the word. But the surprises didn't stop there. For decades, one enduring theory suggested that Pictish kingship was passed down through the female line, a matrilineal system thought to be unique in medieval Europe. Yet, when scientists compared the DNA of individuals from these burial sites, the results told a more complex story. There was no clear genetic evidence for inheritance solely through women. Instead, the data revealed a far more flexible system of kinship and succession, one that didn't fit the neat categories historians had assumed. Entire theories about Pictish politics, built on centuries of speculation, suddenly needed rewriting. The findings also redefined how we understand Pictish influence beyond the mainland. Earlier historians believed the Picts had migrated in large numbers to the Orkney Islands, but the genetic evidence painted a subtler picture. The Pictish footprint there wasn't one of mass movement, it was cultural. Their influence spread through trade, marriage, and shared ideas rather than conquest or colonization. Once again, DNA turned long-held assumptions upside down, replacing myth with a more human, nuanced understanding of how cultures intertwine. When the research was published, one headline summed up the reaction perfectly. DNA evidence finally solved the mystery of Scotland's Picts and left experts speechless. It wasn't an exaggeration. For generations, the Picts had been seen as a vanished people, erased by time and absorbed into legend. But now, science had given them their voice back. The genetic record proved that they hadn't vanished at all. Their descendants live on in the DNA of modern Scots, their identity transformed within the Kingdom of Alba, but their lineage unbroken. The impact of this discovery reached far beyond Scotland. It forced historians to rethink what it means when a people disappears from history. The Picts had not faded into myth. They had evolved, woven into a new national identity while leaving their own indelible mark behind. As one researcher put it, this doesn't just rewrite Scottish history, it rewrites how we think about history itself. For the first time, the Picts were no longer silent. Their bones had spoken, and what they revealed was both humbling and profound. Yet, this breakthrough didn't close the book on the Picts. If anything, it opened it wider than ever. The answers unearthed in 2023 raised even deeper questions. For centuries, scholars had treated the Picts' disappearance as one of Britain's great unsolved mysteries. Now we know they didn't vanish at all. They transformed, merging with the Gaels and shaping the birth of Scotland. That single truth reshapes the nation's origin story, proving that the Picts weren't a forgotten branch of humanity, but a vital root of Scottish identity. Were those carvings sacred messages, markers of territory and kinship, or perhaps a language bridging the mortal and spiritual worlds? Science may have answered the biological questions, but the emotional and cultural riddles remain unsolved. Meanwhile, archaeology keeps pushing the boundaries of what we know. Ongoing excavations at sites like Tapo-Nuth and Burghead have revealed settlements of staggering scale, proto-cities and palaces that suggest a society of architects, rulers, and thinkers, not mere raiders on the fringes of empire. When this physical evidence is combined with genetic insight, the Picts emerge as pioneers of early Scottish civilization, builders of fortified centers, masters of trade, and keepers of traditions that would shape the nation to come. Because if DNA can solve the mystery of the Picts, one can only wonder what other lost civilizations are still waiting beneath our feet, their bones holding answers that could once again rewrite history? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.